Hello, everybody who is here for the Adolescent Open House. Thank you for being here. I just see a lot of folks streaming in, so we'll just give them one moment. Thank you for your patience as we are doing our first ever virtual enrollment open house. Let's see. I'm just going to set one item up on our video, and just want to let everybody know who is here. That we will be answering some adolescent-specific open house questions today. And also, we'll be going through just a short little slideshow in just a moment. Let's see. Okay, great. Okay, great. We got a lot of folks who are here, finally arriving on time. Again, thank you all for your patience and your persistence as I arrive just a few moments later than planned at this first ever virtual open house for Great River School. And so let's see, without further ado, oh, good, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. So hello. I am Sam O'Brien, head of school at Great River School, and I'm here to take you on a virtual informational tour of, okay, here we go, virtual Great River School tour. Just one moment as I pull up a wonderful presentation. Those of you who have not been to a question before, to a webinar before, you can put your question and answers in the Q&A box. On your Zoom screen at the bottom is a little chat box that says Q&A. And so you can put your questions in there. You can also chat. The Zoom link was not working, is my experience also. This is recorded though, if you know other folks who are going to be interested or coming. We will post the recording of this on the website also. So those of you who are here, thank you for getting the Zoom link to work. And thank you for coming, those of you who are in. If you do have a question you want answered, please put it in the Q&A box. That's just, again, down here at the bottom of the screen. And without further ado, I will be using this open house presentation to let you know. Oh, great, good, there we go. So Great River School, we are a Montessori public school, meaning that we are public school just like any other public school, except that as an independent school district, we are a charter school. We have a school board that makes all the governing decisions for our school, and all the students who come to our school come free of any charge or tuition, so we are funded through the state of Minnesota. Specifically, our mission is to prepare students for their unique roles as responsible and engaged citizens of the world. We really engage in making sure that students have opportunities for hands-on experiences, both relationship experiences, problem-solving experiences, and then literal hands-on experiences working with materials. We break age groups into lower and upper elementary, and then also lower and upper adolescent. So each of those 3-year age groupings combine in the lower elementary, grades 1, 2, and 3 are all together. In the lower adolescent, we have community events and program structure that groups together 7th and 8th year students in classes, and a 9th year preparatory program to really bridge the transition between a lower adolescent experience and the high school experience at upper adolescent. Those 9th years have leadership roles for younger ages, both in the 7th and 8th grade and lower. And then our upper adolescent talks about 10th through 12th graders. What we know is that the key experiences and the community experiences that we establish are really important to our students. Now, during the pandemic, we are not doing overnight trips, though we have made plans for safety and safely mitigated trips when the pandemic infection rates and infection levels are lower and the community prevalence of this virus is lower. And so we do anticipate still engaging in those overnight trips just as soon as it's secure and health safe to do so. So if your question is when will you do that, there are criteria we have set about community infection rates, test positivity rates being below 5%, cases per 10,000 being below 10, and then or and or the access to mitigation standards like local testing availability and or vaccination ability. So we have those standards. The overnight trips are just one, though, of the ways that we build those kinds of key experiences for community. So this year, and even this spring and this winter, we're engaging in other ways to get students involved with each other by doing hard things together, which is the goal of those overnight trips, is not to take a vacation and not, in fact, vacate in any way, but students are way more present with each other, usually overcoming challenges that are engaging. So community meetings would be a time when the whole classroom community and at the adolescent level, say all 127th and 8th graders, or all 69th graders, or all say 60 members or 65 members of a grade level at the high school, or the whole high school would get together and have a large meeting where they talk about what's going well, what could improve, and then have compliments and thank yous for each other. And so in a way, it's a healthy democratic process, like when a large body gets together and talks about how the community is doing. And then growth mindset academics specifically mean that we don't believe people are good or bad at things. We don't believe that any one person is inherently good at a skill or bad at a skill. We believe that you can learn skills. Some people might be inclined or have had life experiences that set them up to be more successful at first with things, but that if you work at things like intelligence or physical skills, those things can be developed. And what we find and what we know through our research, and not necessarily our own research as a school, but our witnessing and research as a school and our students, but also psychological and academic research, is that if students believe intelligence can be developed, then they will work harder at developing their own skills and intelligence, and they will have better outcomes as a learner. So why do students succeed here? Well, because we encourage responsibility and require it of students. We also require respect, and we teach ways to be respectful of each other as a community. And then we talk about interdependence. So we want students to independently engage in their work, but we also want students to know that they depend on each other to do well as a community. So what do we mean when we say community? We mean we have a shared responsibility that everyone's needs are heard, understood, and met. And needs are very different than preferences. Also, we want to respect the contributions of everybody. So in a typical school, say a valedictorian, the person who is most academically successful, or someone who is voted to speak at graduation might speak. A Great River tradition that I think identifies and really shines a light on the contributions of every individual being respected is that at a Great River School graduation for seniors in high school, every person is welcome to get up and say something at the graduation to their community of graduates. And so that is just one example of how at each area, at each level, and each age group, we're putting together opportunities for and structures to require of every student to be respected and every student's voice to be a required part of the community. And then everyone being necessary and essential. So every Great River student makes our school more successful, either through understanding their challenges and working to overcome them, either through finding their own talents and passions and really shining, or just through the relationships and community that is built through taking on a shared challenge. And so the skills we build at Great River School are academic. Students do learn how to do math, read well, write articulately. Also, though, resilience, understanding, working in groups, and then the capacity to try new things, which we find are life skills that apply both across disciplines and as adults. Rarely do you find an adult who's going to sit down and say to the person next to them, so are you a fast reader or a slow reader? Are you a good reader or a bad reader? However, I still hear some junior high students sometimes say things like that to each other. What we find is that if students understand that if they work at something, they'll develop skills at it, and also that the capacity to try things that you might be uncomfortable with at first is an important skill to move into adulthood and again engage in solving the kind of real world problems that we see our adults are asked to solve. So your child will learn academic skills, interdependence, and at the adolescent level, that respect for self, others, their work, and the school environment will mean that they have some personal responsibility to take their assignments and figure out how to approach them. to approach their teachers and work with their teachers on a plan that is somewhat individualized into how to meet their responsibilities, and to really take a positive growth attitude, meaning if something's difficult or uncomfortable at first, it's our expectation as a school that we would engage in that thing. And you don't have to love it. It doesn't have to become your passion, but you do have to attend to it, put your care into working at it, and be willing to talk with your peers and your teachers about it. So the focus of our curriculum is meaningful work, meaning we do have responsibilities, we do have state standards that we focus on in our classes, we do have academic work that is done, and we want students to know what the meaning of that work is as they engage in it. So that, will I ever use this math? That's a question that our math teachers engage in on day one with our students. It doesn't mean our students are satisfied with the answer at all times, but it does mean that we want our students to be asking and answering that question for themselves as we do the work. So hands-on at the lower levels in the elementary means Montessori materials like the ones that you see here in this lower right-hand slide, but also individual work plans, meaning that a student in a class would have an assignment, would have a due date, would have skills they have to demonstrate in that assignment, but we want that student to engage with their teacher in a conversation about how they can make that work meaningful for them. And then at the 11th and 12th year, we do incorporate through a Montessori method, the International Baccalaureate curriculum. We do have school transportation. Now this is an adolescent focused info night. And so I'll say that for adolescent students, biking and walking and metro passes for the bus would be the way that most of our students get to school. Some of our older students, it's a very small percentage, do drive a vehicle, and some students do carpool or get dropped off on site. I'll speak here, it says limited school busing. Those yellow school buses that you see at the very bottom are only for our 1st through 6th grade students. And specifically for our last 15 years, we have run the Metro Transit as the focus for students who need vehicle transportation to and from school. And what we find is that a couple things happen. The independence of riding that Metro Transit bus really teaches students about engaging in the world, and through a sense of competent interdependence, finding a really safe and secure and practiced way to get to and from school. So large groups of our students get off respectfully and quietly of our bus that's just at the corner of our school every morning in a typical school year. Excuse me. So the elementary typical school day has been 8:30 a.m. to 3:10 p.m. And then at the adolescent level, that includes core classes. At the high school level, we offer Spanish language as a foreign language. If a student speaks a foreign language already, they have the option to pursue an exam for credit for that and work with students through dozens of languages to be able to do that. We do have election options, this thing called occupations at the 7th and 8th year level that 9th through 12th years can be managers of, which have to do with taking care of real live goats and chickens and animals and livestock on campus, taking care of the farming and gardening operation, or taking care of real world businesses like a cafe or the nutrition program. So the activities that we offer for adolescent students also include athletics, arts, many student clubs. These are the clubs listed here, the clubs that are most consistent. I'm noticing many parentheticals in our club listings here, so excuse our typo, but we are adding clubs basically almost as often as a student comes up with an idea. And that means that these clubs that are listed are the most consistent ones year to year. And then we have after school program activities such as debate, wood carving, archery, chess, math club. These things, Technovation and Lego League and robotics clubs are extremely popular. And so students also then, based on their talents and their interests, will form specific after school activities that go a little bit even beyond a club and can get a instructor or an expert to come in after school and instruct them. So we have a growth mindset academic approach, like I have said. We focus on social emotional belonging as a foundation to our educational program, which I have seen means that students who are academically already very achieved do very well at our school. Students who have not achieved at high levels academically in the past tend to increase their academic achievement and sense of belonging at school because of our focus on the social emotional programs. And then we do have clear discipline and community agreements, meaning that the community of students who are together sit down and spend a good amount of time at the start of the year really setting an agreement for how will we be with each other, how will we engage in conflict, what do we expect of each other, and that those rules and those agreements are agreed to and set up as a contract at the start of the year as part of the community agreements that hold our school together. So this is a funny slide, but I think answers the question, like, how do I know that you're really doing all these things you said you do? Well, we have this thing called an authorizer. So the state of Minnesota requires us to have a third party check up on us and make sure that we are teaching students, that we're meeting state mandates and guidelines, and that we are a public school. So we do engage in the Minnesota Comprehensive Assessment because it's a law that we do so in grades 3 through 11. And then specifically, I'll show in the next few slides our MCA results, but we also have an obligation to the International Baccalaureate organization, which is an international standard setting organization that audits us every 5 years on routine and checks in on us to make sure we are teaching the content and high level standards that they expect of an international baccalaureate school. Here I'll show Great River shown in yellow. In gray is the Minnesota state averages, and in blue is the St. Paul Public School District. Now, I don't want you to take from this that somehow we are a 33-point better school than St. Paul, but it tends to be at our school that our reading proficiency is much higher than the state as a whole or St. Paul Public Schools. And I believe that has to do with the focus on independence and research and storytelling that we use at early grades and I emphasize throughout the adolescent program. In terms of student growth, this is something that is really important. So we're on the far left-hand side there, and anything in blue or gray are students making high or medium growth. And so what you can see is that generally more students at Great River in reading are making high growth than the state as a whole or St. Paul Public Schools. I, though, will say here, I think we are an excellent school. I also think there are many excellent St. Paul Public Schools and schools statewide. And so what we want to see as educators is actually all of our students over in the gray and the blue making high growth throughout the whole year. Now in math, I just want to identify that again, Great River School here is shown in yellow. We are near a statewide average in terms of our math, and we are slightly increasing over the past couple of years. And as I again show growth here, Great River School over here on the left, again, I want to point out that I think because of our emphasis on social emotional learning, and then again, our emphasis on a sense of belonging, we do have many more students than the state or St. Paul Public School District specifically making high growth in mathematics year to year. Now, in terms of school demographics, I'll say something that may or may not make you comfortable or uncomfortable, but I think it's something to be said. If you've done your research, if you've used something called the Minnesota State Report Card to look at the demographics of other public schools in the state, you would look at our school and you would identify that Great River School by student identity and racial demographics is actually, this is from last year, we're about 73% white identifying students right now. Now, when you look at St. Paul Public Schools or the city of St. Paul by ethnicity, that does not match the young people who attend St. Paul Public Schools or the state, or excuse me, the city as a whole. And so if we were going to be plain about it, I would ask, why are there so many white kids at this school, especially compared to other schools in the area of St. Paul? And so I will identify several things. One, we do have an active student body, and we do have an active Black and Indigenous and student of color community. And we do hear from students, especially at the adolescent level, open conversations about how to address the inevitable social awkwardness and or social challenges, and sometimes social conversations that happen uniquely at our school that wouldn't happen at another school. And we do openly talk about systemic issues of racism. We do openly talk, and we have for many years, about systemic issues of oppression and why and how the educational system generally has not served non-white students as well as white students on a whole. So we talk about that systemic aspect, and then we also talk specifically about individual relationships and the ways that systemic aspects and systemic positions of power affect the ability of students to relate to each other. And so at any school, especially I would say over these last 11 months, it is important to be able to have those conversations openly about identity. And we focus on those areas of study, not only in social studies and civics and government classes, but analyzing those kinds of patterns of disparities around economics, race, gender, and identity in mathematics, in science, and in all of our studies. And so specifically, we do work to talk directly about race, racism, and institutional oppression. And we do have outcomes to report, though, that in the state of Minnesota, everyone watching and everyone listening in should understand that there are patterns right now in the state of Minnesota where on the whole, you can predict academic outcomes and they correlate so closely to racial identity that it's an irresponsible state for educators and education institutions. So I want to speak directly to it. Sometimes folks ask about these things and sometimes I feel like they withhold their questions. So I'll just speak out directly. Right now, if we broke, now I just want to also identify within each of these areas of identity. Great River is shown here in terms of yellow. And then St. Paul Public School is shown here in terms of the gray bar, and then the state of Minnesota in the blue bar again. And on the left-hand side are the whole group of identities that would be by the federal government and state government qualifying as Black. So that would be folks who have been in this country, who are Black for many generations. That would be folks who have immigrated to this country from African nations. And so anyone who identifies themselves as Black or African American, and so that would include Somali, Eritrean, Ghanaian, any of those identities would include in the Black demographic. And again, the same with the diversity of Latinx, and as the state requires us to report Hispanic identities. And again, the many dozens of identities that I know are present in the Asian demographic. So reporting generally on those, because it's how the federal government collects data, I will report that we are observing that the way we invest in social emotional learning, the way we invest in relationships and student belonging, and the way we also invest in students independently finding meaning in their work and then engaging in it, means that we see much higher rates of success across demographics in terms of making growth and being on track to meet state standards or exceed them among these demographic groups. Now, this is by no means means that we're done with our work. We want to see, in fact, all of these bars at 100%, but I do want to give a picture that we do see indications that students have a higher degree of success in our educational model. And again, this is on track for success in math. And again, in mathematics, you see at Great River School students making a large deal of growth, especially I would say Black students show a real positive response in their mathematics studies at our school demographically. We also are a school that has a very visible and active LGBTQ plus support network and active club. And then we have special education programs and English language learner programs. And then we also ask of families to engage in meaningful conversations, ask students to take responsibility for things at home, and then hold high expectations for students. So we want families to ask, how can we be part of a solution? And so if you see something we can improve on, we want to hear from you. And if you see a way that you can help, then we need to hear from you. And so as you consider enrolling in our school, the process for applying is that you fill out an enrollment document. And then we have a lottery because we are often having more families apply than we have spaces to enroll. Generally for next year, we're going to enroll about 65 new first-year students. And then at the other grades, somewhere between 2 and 6 new students, depending on the grade or if students have departed or families have moved away. As you look at enrolling an adolescent student, generally families will move sometimes before 7th grade, and then often about a half a dozen students before 9th grade. And so we tend to see openings there, though at 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, we do tend to see openings for students that if you apply, you likely have a higher likelihood of being offered a spot than at some of the middle elementary grades. So we do offer parent education, meaningful work for students, systemic supports for students to be engaged in their work, challenged to engage, and then respected and have dignity in their work. And then you're required as a community member here as a family. So if you have questions, I'm going to get to them right now, and I'll stop my screen share. Thank you all for participating. And I think we will end on time. So I've got 4 questions in the Q&A, and then, oh, great. And then just a good deal of questions in the chat. So what we will do is start with the Q&A. So here, an active question: how do you support advanced learners? Are AP credits available for upper grades? So specifically, Montessori Education would challenge students who say move faster through the curriculum or have more academic aptitude to go deeper into the subject area being studied, rather than move farther ahead, quote unquote, of their peers. So let's say somebody who is really gifted in the study of mathematics, they would be placed in an appropriate level mathematics course. So if your 8th year student, say, finished geometry in 8th grade, or finished algebra 2, say, even in 8th grade, they would be placed in then an advanced geometry or a pre-calculus class as a 9th year student. But it is our goal to have that student be learning with peers in that subject area appropriately, and then going as deeply as they can into the area of study that they can do. So students who say advanced in social studies or literature, or sees themselves as very academically capable in science, that student would generally be taking classes with students who in another school would not be in an advanced course, but the advanced student would likely either be doing some peer teaching, which we see actually results in a much greater mastery of the content material, or would be doing further, deeper independent labs that would be the equivalent of advanced or honors courses at other schools. Again, we have about 65 students per adolescent grade. And so that means that those students really get to know each other well and depend on each other. And again, in the college application process of our seniors, we do see that our seniors will apply to very advanced elite institutions. And we also see that our same, their same classmates who might have been in the same courses as them will be applying to not as selective institutions, but those 2 students have learned from each other. How many spaces are generally available in upper elementary grades? So this is an adolescent focused info night, and I'll talk more about the elementary at the other info night later this evening, but rarely are upper elementary spots open. So maybe 1 or 2 per grade per year with a long wait list. Generally, there are more spaces at very early grades of 1st year, or 7th grade or 9th grade. So is 6th grade considered upper elementary? 6th grade is upper elementary. I know for all of you who might be at a St. Paul Public School elementary school, you're in 5th year and you're looking for a 6th year option. We have few 6th year spots. It is always, however, still worth applying. And, it depends on exactly the year, but especially coming out of a pandemic, I wouldn't expect a lot of folks to unenroll, but you never know. And so it's worth you applying, even if you're looking at a 6th year spot. Even if typically folks don't depart our school between 5th and 6th grade, some do. And so it is possible. And if we enroll your 6th year student into an upper elementary classroom, I can tell you they will be well prepared as a Montessori student for their junior high, and will also face a really interesting and really engaging set of responsibilities in their classroom as a 6th year student. Number of openings in the adolescent level grades for new students. Again, it depends on the year. Sometimes between 6th and 7th grade, we have students whose families decide that a different learning model is more appropriate for them. Not as often, but sometimes. More often between 8th and 9th year, some of our students will decide that they want a bigger high school experience. So in general, anywhere between, say, 3 and a dozen spots in 9th year, and anywhere between, say, 1 and 6 spots for any other given year, depending on the year. But again, we're coming out of a pandemic, I hope, in the next 6 months. And so as we enroll next year, it is especially worthwhile for anyone who is interested to just fill out that simple enrollment application that's on our website, and then you'll get all the updates. And it doesn't hold you back in any way, just to fill out the enrollment application and throw your name in the hat. let's see, what is the number of high school students? So we have about 65 students per grade. And so that times 4 means about 260 students in the 9th through 12th grade. We do group our students into 3-year age grouping. So the 10th, 11th, and 12th year students have community meetings together, have advisories together, and stick in a pretty tight 3-year cohort. And so that 10th through 12th grade program is about 195 students. The 9th year program, however, I think is unique, and we have found really prepares our 9th years well for academic and social success in high school. And so that's 65 students split into 3 or 4 advisories. And so those students really get to know each other well and are integrated sometimes in the 10th through 12th programming throughout the year, and then often also in leadership roles for younger students. So typical school day looks like for a student in 7th and 8th year. Typical school day would look like showing up to school and engaging in either a humanities class studying social studies and literature, or engaging in an occupations class studying science concepts through real life application. You would do that for approximately an hour and a half to 2 hours, and then have a break and a switch in disciplines, and you'd go to another teacher or another class. And then specifically, you'd have lunch at about 11 o'clock. And then in the afternoon, you'd likely engage in an occupation or a a creative expression. And so that's an arts class or a music class or a community-oriented class for gaining other skills. That information also is available on our website. You can search our website for the School or Student Resource Manual, or the SRC for the Student Resource Center, and you'll see what a typical day currently looks like as we operate distance learning. Let's see, do we have any foreign exchange programs? So we don't operate foreign exchange programs. However, we have seen many of our students apply for a leave of absence for a year and go engage in an exchange program with another country. And which sports are available for students in the lower adolescent group? So as a small community, our lower adolescent students starting in 7th grade are often eligible to participate or try out for even varsity high school sports. And so the athletics are listed on our website, but I'll just say quickly now, we have cross-country skiing. I was about to say downhill, but we don't have downhill this year, but we have commonly also in the past. We have cross-country skiing. Let's see, boys and girls basketball, cheerleading, hockey cooperative. In the springtime, we have baseball and track, as well as a very active ultimate frisbee program. And in the fall, soccer, football. We've had students play lacrosse on club teams. We've had students play, we have girls volleyball in the fall. So really we have a cooperative with 2 other high schools where we form varsity teams to compete in typical varsity high school athletics. And then we also have students who participate in regional or club teams for other sports that are not, that we don't form on our own. Let's see, what type of work happens in the afternoons? So for the adolescent level, especially for the 9th through 12th years, those same classes happen in the afternoons. There's not a special afternoon for 9th through 12th years. In the 7th and 8th grades, it is more common for an occupation or creative expression to happen in the afternoon. And so that is that would include something like bike shop or an arts class that does beautification of the campus, or projects like murals, or a class that might make a product to sell. So for 7th and 8th years, that's common in the afternoons. Let's see, how many African Americans are in the 9th through 12th grades? Eric Anderson asking this question. School-wide, we have approximately a 10 to 15% African American population, and so that can vary pretty highly per grade. And then the 9th through 12th grades, roughly, I know that currently those 9th through 12th grades do reflect that 10 to 15% number. So with 260 or so students in the 9th through 12th grade, approximately 40 of those students would be African American. I have African American children. Do you have any BiPOC teachers? We do. In fact, we have about 17% of our staff right now is BiPOC. And for those of you who are maybe becoming familiar with the term BiPOC, means Black, Indigenous, or Person of Color. We have programs to support the retention and recruitment, and I would say the thriving and hopefully nourishing experience of Black, Indigenous, and people of color who are educational educators at our school, and statewide and locally in the Twin Cities metro area. Just everyone on the call and everyone listening in later should understand that it is imperative that the state and society do everything in our power to support educators of color, because our teaching force has to look and sound to students like their world does. And their world is increasingly racially diverse, and we have to support the excellent and brilliant educators who are non-white, and it is a challenge statewide. But at our school, we have specific open conversations, specific resources for, and specific support for our BiPOC teachers. So I hope I've answered your question. How do you support students who may engage in learning but have learning difficulties? So often students who have learning challenges specifically would likely usually have an IEP or an individualized education plan, and they would have legal rights to access services and accommodations that they need. I think there's another question about special education coming up. Is there project-based learning? Is there a Genius Hour, 15% time at Great River? We don't have formal Genius Hour or 15% time, though we do have, say, in a given school week, in a typical learning year, we have about 12 of those hours minimum throughout the week that are something we call independent work. And so for some students, those are times to work on very basic executive functioning and organizational skills of what do I do next? How do I plan out my day? For some students who are very adept at getting their responsibilities met, that is the time in the week where they really go further and delve into interests and or work with their peers to teach them further, or go pursue an individual project. Project-based learning is a very formal thing that some schools only do project-based learning. I would say most of the projects at Great River School, when we are successful, are project-based learning that the student has directed. Many of the projects would fit all the project-based learning criteria. And what that means is you identify usually a community problem or challenge, either in the school, in your classroom community, or regionally, or in what you see in society. And then you would work on solutions to that problem. And through the solutions and research, you would learn. So just a little education ease for everybody. How many years of foreign language can a 9 through 12 student take? Well, in those 4 years, you could take 4 years of a foreign language. We ask students to take 2 years of a foreign language at a minimum. And again, if you speak a language other than English language, either on your own or at home, you can we'll work with you to actually gain academic recognition for that language spoken, whether it is Hmong or Somali or Aramaic or any language that you might be speaking at home. Let's see, you had mentioned 9th graders are leaders in the lower adolescent group. Do you find that a new 9th grader integrates well and can take on some of those roles as a new student? Absolutely, yes. And our students have also become very aware that, like I've been saying, somewhere between a half a dozen and a dozen new 9th graders might come in any given year. So in a class of 65 people, if half a dozen, or a dozen, 10 to 20% are new, the students are very aware that being a welcoming community means really making space for those new students to be participants. And so I found that it's really an important skill to know both how to be a new person, and it's an important skill for those of us who are already at the school to welcome those new people. And yes, 9th graders who are new to the school would definitely take on those leadership roles. All right, so we've got wonderful, many more questions still coming in. I'm just gonna make sure the questions in the chat are answered too. Great River School does support students with IEPs. We do have some students who are setting 2 IEPs, and we, as a public school, we're very proud and very engaged in supporting students who need accommodations. The start time of the day typically has been 8:30 a.m. I will identify that currently we start this learning day at 9 a.m. during pandemic operations. And that if you are interested in how we're dealing with the pandemic or how we're looking to come back in person or when, please visit our website and know that from 6 to 7 p.m. We have public community forums that you are welcome to visit. I host them from 6 to 7 every Tuesday. So if my child is an upcoming 7th grader new to Montessori, is a difficult adjustment to the Montessori method in 7th grade? I would say on the whole, no, not a difficult adjustment. Specifically, students who do well are students who want to be engaged in their learning or are willing to be interested or inspired. And students who might feel a challenge adjusting would be students who are doing the work to get a grade or want to know how many points an assignment is worth in order to do it, or want to basically finish the work as fast as they can and be done with it. We typically ask students to engage in their work and do the work that they can. And when they say they're finished, we sit down and say, what's good about this? What could use more work? And what could you do to go farther? And so we want students to be engaged in their learning. And so if they're engaged only really in outcomes, that will be a tough transition. But I've seen many students make that transition really successfully. Do we offer band? We do have musical instruction, vocal music instruction. I just want to be clear, when you say band, if you mean 60 students in the room at a time with 4 tubas and 6 drummers, we don't have that kind of band, but we do have an excellent and award-winning instrumental music teacher and program. And we do have students form bands, and even within those courses, form small bands of even quartets, quintets, and larger bands that play together. Do we support sensory breaks? In fact, Jody, we not only have sensory breaks, but we integrate sensory integration into our learning activities. So we have wobble boards and wobble chairs and upright standing chairs and standing desks and sitting desks and sitting on the floor, and as many sensory and kinesthetic adjustments as we can make to make the general learning environment appropriate for any student. And so we typically, by the adolescent level, have integrated those into the learning environment. So it's not a break from learning, but it's something you're doing while you're engaging in your learning, maybe like this. In any case, thank you for your humor. We do offer PSEO, as does every school in the state. And for those of you who don't know, it's post-secondary educational opportunities. And for those of you who asked about advanced or AP credits, I don't think I said that. We have the International Baccalaureate program at Great River School. We don't generally offer an extensive AP program, though. At times in the past, we've offered AP economics, or just a single AP class like that. But we do focus on the International Baccalaureate Advanced Course of Study. And that, however, is offered to every student. And so everybody, whether you were a high-flying academic achiever in 9th and 10th grade, or whether you were struggling to get your academics in order in 9th and 10th grade, all 11th graders are engaged in the IB program. And that is something we've been successfully doing for over a decade. And we see excellent results for academic high flyer, high achiever students. And for students who weren't academically high achieving, they learn actually that when those expectations are set and they're given the right tools to work through those challenges, that all students are able generally to achieve at high levels. And we see that the students who typically wouldn't be in the same courses at other high schools, because they've worked together, learn a lot from each other. Typical class sizes are somewhere between, I would say, 15 and 22 in any given class, sometimes smaller, sometimes a little bit bigger. We don't have overtly an AVID offering, though we do have leadership training programs, and we prepare students in 9th and 10th grade to apply for internships and externships outside of school and engage in their community. There we go. So the chat, I've answered a lot in the chat, but I'm going to go back to the question and answer, and we're going to finish all those up. It's going to be a little bit of a lightning round, everybody, but I think we're going to be okay. And then I'll wrap this up in a moment. Let's see. We don't have AP classes generally. It would be an exception to have them. We don't have a uniform. A student can come in with an IEP for reading or dysgraphia or reading disabilities. Are spaces in the 7th grade lottery or are siblings of current students given priority? By state law, siblings of current students do have priority, and we still have a lottery. And so it is imperative that if you're interested in the school, you fill out the enrollment application. And that means that your name is on a list and you're guaranteed a slot in the lottery. And whether or not we get to that slot, it depends on the year and the grade, but you should definitely fill it out if you're interested. The next question is, when is the next IB review? We actually just completed 1 year ago, our 5-year audit with flying colors, and we're reauthorized for another 5 years of IB programming. And so the next one will be 4 years from now. This question from Anne Rodenberg. Do you recommend applying for 9th grade when starting high school, or starting high school somewhere else and coming in its 10th grade if the original school isn't a good fit? And I recommend applying for enrollment every year. And if you get the opportunity to enroll, then you can make that decision. And sometimes we offer 9th year spots well before 9th year begins. Sometimes we call the day before 9th grade starts. Sometimes we'll call you in December, January, February and say, somebody moved to Colorado, now we have an open spot. So you should really apply so that you have the choice in front of you, and keep applying as long as you're interested. And I hope any school is a good fit for you, but if our school is the best fit, then please apply early and often. Though you'll just get one name on the waiting list or on the lottery or offered. What are some of the ways Great River School intentionally tries to reach communities of color and encourages applications? The challenge being the limited number of spaces versus the number of applications. I would imagine the large percent of white students is largely due to word of mouth within the white student body and family community. I would imagine a similar thing. The demographic certitude or stuckness of our demographics is not unique to our school. I know schools who are predominantly non-white, predominantly Latinx or predominantly Kareni or predominantly Somali or predominantly African American or Black, who would like to diversify their student body. And yes, I think it is common that the word of mouth among students who are at our school already tends in the state of Minnesota to reflect the social, I would say, disconnection usually between folks who are white and folks who are Black, or folks who are white and folks who are non-white. Specifically though, however, what we are doing, we do outreach with local community organizations. We do outreach currently and have done outreach in the past with local faith organizations. And we have done outreach at junior high schools and are doing outreach at junior high schools in the area, and are considering, now that it is pandemic time, even doing mailings in especially, say, the North End, Midway and Frogtown neighborhoods, so that folks are aware of our school. We also have a summer camp, and we offer many summer camp positions and or enrollment to specifically students only from our specific neighborhood. And I would say also that, just to be blunt about it, Montessori historically has typically been a largely private and largely white educational opportunity. And so as a public Montessori, we are unique. We're one of just 4 Montessori public high schools in the country, and one of only a couple Montessori 1st through 12th year programs in the country. And so we do have some, I think, innovative work that needs to be done in order to diversify our student population. But you're correct. Let's see, do students spend time outside daily? Absolutely. Even students in high school have the opportunity to go outside for lunch and or physical activity during the midday break. We offer many visual arts classes, both ceramics and sculpture and 3D in a 3D studio downstairs, as well as drawing, painting, and 2D work in a 2D room, generally upstairs. We offer those arts classes and specialty classes at 7th through 12th grade. How do you support students who have difficulties working in groups? We work on those skills of how to work in groups, and specifically talk about the reasons and motivations for doing group work, that learning how to listen to others, work with others, and also assert yourself and make your needs known is really important. What are the class trip opportunities that 9th years typically experience? Generally, 9th years in the fall will take a trip to a farm or an agricultural location. generally our partner is just across the river up in Osceola, Wisconsin, and ninth years will engage there in the meaningful work of harvest of plants that usually Great River School students seeded the spring before, and then making of products to bring back to the school community. Do you offer college in schools or PSEO? Yes, we do. Are there other language programs as classes? We have chosen to offer one foreign language, a Spanish language, and do that very well as a very small high school and adolescent program. And so if you want to study another language, then we support you in finding access to that either through PSEO or other opportunities that are not instructed by instructors at the school. The International Baccalaureate program, please talk about it, is this person's question. I will, and specifically the International Baccalaureate program, and as I see we're approaching our time, I just want to let folks know, as I answer this question, you're welcome to stay, and I'll finish all the questions that are here tonight. And if you have a question that didn't get answered, or you have to leave or walk away, please feel free to send that question to us at office@greatriverschool.org. The International Baccalaureate program, really you can look up many explanations of it, but an international program where the academic standards, and we offer only the diploma program at our school, which is just for 11th and 12th year students. That diploma program standardizes the curriculum across all of the schools internationally that offer the IB curriculum. And it seeks to do a semester of college coursework each year. And so for students who successfully finish that program, it is both a high level academic achievement that is seen well by many colleges and universities. And it's a program also that really challenges students to engage in explaining their learning and analyzing information. So it is much more about engagement, analysis, and understanding than it is about obtaining and recalling facts. Can students shadow at all, even on Zoom? This spring, we will likely have an experience like that, yes, if you're offered a spot for enrollment. What's your special education model? Generally, our special education model is integrated into the general education setting. We have two or three special education teachers per level, or consequently about one special education teacher for every 12 or so special education students. We have a social worker for every 3 grades, meaning we have 4 social workers at our school, which is about a social worker for every 190 students. Where do most students live? Are there many who come in from outside of St. Paul? Well, we do. Our mission is to be a school that prepares students for their unique roles as engaged citizens. And specifically, we aim to be a community school, though we do currently enroll students from over 60 zip codes. So yes, students do come out from outside of St. Paul proper. Technology is being used by students and teachers, even when we're not in pandemic operation, though we rarely have a Zoom call, if ever, before this pandemic started. Through distance learning right now, we are still focusing on group work, community meetings, and still working in a similar way. But yeah, a lot of technology right now. We do have technology, though, available in a typical school year for students to learn skills around word processing, using apps and tools to do their work, and then when appropriate, using screens. But we also emphasize handwriting, especially in the lower adolescent level, as a way of organizing cognition and expression. And then also word processing ideas, but also using handwritten outlines and handwritten notes to engage in your work. There are not factors that can increase chances of admission. The only preferences that the state mandates are that siblings of currently enrolled students need a preference, and that the children of current employees can get an enrollment preference. But it's a wide open lottery. And so you enroll by just filling out your name and making sure your name is on our list. About 20%, some years a little less, some grades a little less, of our students have IEPs. And we do help students that have issues working with their hands or motor skill issues, formally through occupational therapy, and then informally through accommodations and plans to help those students gain those skills. And then here, an important question, I think, since more white families apply, does it not make it even harder for those non-white families to get in? So a couple things. One, at our earlier grades, we actually see less a less dominant percentage of white families and white identifying students gaining admission. We see more racial diversity over the past couple of years where we are taking in large numbers of applicants. And then I would even say among students who are admitted at the adolescent levels over the last couple of years, especially, I think we're seeing some success in our networking community building efforts at seeing a higher percentage of students of color gain admission through enrollment. And so we are also working with the state of Minnesota and the Department of Education to see any way that we might be able to take steps to address the effective racial disparities that we see in our classrooms in terms of the population. What we do know is that students learn well at our school, whether they are white or Black or Latinx or Asian or any racial background. We tend to see that those students succeed at our school. We also tend to see that, especially for students of color, and I would identify for students who are white identifying, it's not in anyone's interest to be part of a practically or purposefully segregated school experience. And so if our society is going to work, I want us to be able to have the tools to allow us to build a student population that reflects the city we live in. And so this question of, since more white families apply, doesn't it make it hard for Great River to get non-white students into the school? I would identify that we are unable, in fact, legally unable to ask for, gather, or even know the racial identity of any of the families applying. So when you apply, you only put in the student's name and an address and a phone number where we can contact a parent, and we're not allowed to gather any more information. So we could speculate that possibly more white families than families of color are applying. And then I would also just report that when we have this kind of info night, say a year ago before the pandemic, I would say a little less than half the room was white identifying. And so we do see some success in our outreach efforts and in the word of mouth that we're spreading. But I would also say that we are doing what we can. And frankly, we're doing everything possible to advocate for and ask for the Department of Education and the state of Minnesota to allow us to address that racial disparity in our classrooms populations so that we can build a school that looks like the neighborhoods and cities that our students live in currently. And so that is a big question that many schools have to answer. So thank you for asking it. Well, those of you who are still here, thank you so much. We've answered most of the questions. I see one last question. Do the school staff have training in trauma? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, our staff do have training in trauma. I could say a lot more, but I'll just start with, it's really important, I think, to understand that, especially through this and after this pandemic, educators understanding the role of trauma in learning is required of everyone now. And so the school lottery, again, is at the end of February. If you have applied for enrollment, you will find out the results within a few weeks of that. And if you have an offer for enrollment, you'll be invited to a further age-specific info night. So thank you all for joining me. Thank you for your patience for those of you who logged in, and may you be well and care for each other in this fine evening and month. Goodbye now.